Anthony Bourdain met an actress in Rome in 2016. He died within 2 years. Friends saw him grow enamored, spending days traveling across the globe to see her. He completely lost himself, stopped interacting with others, and disregarded his daughter, who is 11 years old. She wrote him a heartbreaking last message the night before he passed away. Until investigators located his phone, the truth about what transpired in that hotel room in France would remain a secret. His last hours reveal a more sinister reality than anyone had anticipated. On June 25, 1956, Anthony Bourdain was born in Manhattan. Despite not being religious, his family had strong cultural and linguistic ties. Pierre, his father, worked in classical music and took on other occupations to support himself. Gladys, his mother, was a skilled and strict copy editor at the New York Times. Anthony was raised in Leonia, New Jersey, which is only 8 minutes from Manhattan, with his younger brother, Christopher. The town was affluent, with large homes and affluent neighbors, but only within their own homes. There was never enough money. His parents occasionally used money they inherited to keep afloat because they spent more than they made. They took him on holidays in Europe and sent him to a private school, but they were frequently barely making ends meet. Anthony's worldview was influenced by this peculiar combination of affluence and hardship. Although he was never fully a part of luxury, he felt like he was. He carried that sense of alienation with him throughout his life. But everything changed in a single moment. The family traveled to the French beach town of Arcachon when he was about 10 years old. Anthony was served a raw oyster straight from the sea by a local fisherman. Others paused, but Anthony took it all in. The flavor is salty, strange and salty. It struck him like nothing else. So, it felt like the future, he said afterwards. His passion for food was ignited by just one oyster, but it was more than that. For him, food represented risk, adventure, and the potential to alter one's perspective on the world. He began to rebel at school at a young age. He penned edgy writings brimming with rage and black humor, listened to punk rock, and read books that were banned. He was arrested stealing and was an admirer of authors such as Hunter S. Thompson. He started using narcotics when he was 14 years old. He rebelled against his mother's strict expectations. He refused to be subdued. He desired to feel alive. Things were going apart at home. His parents were pulled in opposite directions by the strain of conflicting personalities, employment, and finances. His father was a relaxed artist. His mom was astute, driven, and exacting. The strain caused their relationship to break down. They eventually got a divorce. Although Anthony didn't discuss it much, it had an impact. His views on love, family, and trust were influenced by that trauma, which he carried into adulthood. Anthony completed high school 1 year ahead of schedule in 1973. He was only 17. He took this action in order to accompany Nancy Putkoski, his love, to Vassar College. Anthony was among the first groups of males to attend Vassar, which had only begun to accept male students in 1969. But classes didn't matter to him. Nancy was important to him. They frequently skipped lectures and were arrested on petty drug charges. He read underground comics and got stoned more often than he studied. It was already obvious that he was obsessed with escape and relationships. He once acknowledged that he followed Nancy and went to Vassar for that reason, rather than for education. Although he failed the most of his classes, a different event shaped him more than any course ever could. He traveled to Provincetown, Massachusetts during the summer of 1974. There were many outsiders in this crazy artistic town. He was hired as a dishwasher at the Flagship, a popular seafood restaurant, and he was given a poor flat. He didn't care if his hourly wage was less than $2. There were a lot of gruff, humorous folks in the noisy, chaotic kitchen. He was comfortable. He advanced to prep cook and then line cook in a matter of weeks. He found meaning in the pace, the teamwork, and the energy. At last, he felt like he belonged. He had to decide by the end of 1975. His grades were terrible, and Vassar cost almost $5,000 a year. His parents were worn out, impoverished, and angry. He informed them that his goal was to become a chef after dropping university. They stayed away from him. Anthony Bourdain made a decision that would alter his life forever when he was just 19 years old. In the fall of 1976, he enrolled in the Culinary Institute of America rather than continuing his education at Vassar College. The school was in Hyde Park, New York, 5 miles from Vassar. Few people received official culinary degrees in those days. Although kitchens were rigid and outdated, Bourdain voluntarily entered that world. The training was rigorous. There was a lot of practical work in the 12-hour-long classes, rigorous theoretical instruction, and the type of discipline typically found in the armed forces. He didn't simply make it through. He received his real chef's diploma in 1978, just before his 23rd birthday. America's cuisine was still largely uninteresting at the time, and no one considered cooks to be famous. Bourdain, however, was unconcerned. Uncertain whether he would even be able to pay his rent the following month, he threw his diploma into the tangle of New York kitchens. Bourdain remained in the harsh restaurant industry of New York City for almost 2 decades. He worked at establishments like Sullivan's, 1 Avenue, and the Supper Club during the late 1970s and early 1980s. He lived under constant strain. He frequently put in 60 to 70 hours per week at work. There was no serenity in kitchens. They were hard, noisy, and heated. You could lose your job if you make one mistake. One Friday night at Les Ales, he said, felt like a battlefield. The air was heavy with grease and smoke. The cooks pushed hard and worked quickly. I'd run over my own grandmother just to keep the kitchen running, he joked. The salary was terrible. He made less than $500 a week in the 1980s. There were always injuries. Tempers blew up. Alcohol and drugs were popular coping mechanisms for the stress. Being a chef wasn't like that on TV. It was harsh, real, and draining. Bourdain persevered despite everything, connecting with other cooks via sweat and scars. By the early 1980s, things began to get out of hand. Although Bourdain's life appeared chaotic on the outside, it was collapsing on the inside. He began using cocaine, heroin, and then more. Meth, LSD, pills, and mushrooms. He once claimed to have looked for anything that might have been drugs on the carpet. He occasionally smoked paint chips in the hopes that they might work. He grew reckless and cruel. He acknowledged that he was terrible to others around him. He harassed dishwashers. He harassed dishwashers. He shouted at waitstaff. He was disoriented, noisy, and self-centered. But he continued to drink even when he was at his worst. He claimed that the memories of heroin was so sinister that it made him afraid to touch it ever again. He would always remember the picture of himself with a needle in his arm, gazing into the mirror. He remembered that moment. He claimed that darkness influenced his identity years later. The man who would share honest, unvarnished tales about life and cuisine. In 1985, Bourdain married. Nancy Putkoski, whom he had known since high school, was his wife. She belonged to the same group of people he spent his adolescence with and was 2 years older than him. He followed her to Vassar College when it began to admit men. Their relationship was chaotic and crazy. They frequently used drugs together and broke into restaurant kitchens while they were working. Their nearly 2-decade marriage was anything from tranquil. The rifts in their relationship deepened as Bourdain's career took off in the late 1990s. He acknowledged that travel and celebrity drew him away. According to him, Nancy perceived that as a danger, which weakened their relationship. The distance finally got to be too much. In 2005, they divorced. Adolescent defiance had been the beginning, and long nights spent apart, celebrity, and addiction were the finish. Bourdain continued to write while being a full-time chef. He released Bone in the Throat, a crime fiction, in 1995. It was set in the grimy kitchens of New York and was full with details that only someone who has experienced that world would be familiar with. He published another book, Gone Bamboo, 2 years later. An odd and humorous tale of Caribbean assassins. After long shifts, he penned these works late at night while most cooks were either asleep or drinking. He pushed himself, balancing 2 lives simultaneously. Although he wasn't made famous by these works, they were a precursor to his future success. In 1998, Anthony Bourdain finally got his chance after working in the kitchen ceaselessly for 20 years. He rose to the position of executive chef at Manhattan's Brasserie Les Halles. It was always full, so it wasn't just another restaurant. Many visitors came seeking authentic French fare like escargots and steak frites. Suddenly, Bourdain was in control of a machine that served hundreds of people every day, even though he had never had a culinary leadership position before. Despite the extreme strain, he maintained great quality and cheap expenses. For the first time, people paid attention to what he had to say. The core of what would eventually become Kitchen Confidential was that experience. Until 2016, Les Halls remained open. However, supporters converted the building into a shrine after Bourdain passed away in 2018. That location on Park Avenue South came to represent the things he accomplished throughout the most challenging and significant period of his career. Behind the kitchen doors, however, things weren't going well. Later, Bourdain referred to that era as his crazy fury period. He was wretched. He said that he frequently lost control, shouted at employees, and harassed dishwashers. It was more than a brief outburst. He was quite angry and he threw it at anyone who stood in his way. In an environment that didn't allow anyone to slow down, he was tired, using drugs and striving to keep up. He flattened it out years later. He profoundly regretted the several people he had harmed. Everyone in the industry was aware of his combustible nature, which contributed to his growing reputation in addition to his culinary skills. He didn't take pride in it. He saw a destructive, resentful person behind him and lost. And he continued to use heroin while managing that bustling kitchen. His writing made no secret of it. He discussed using heroin and cocaine after lengthy days and then dragging himself back to work the following day, even in the late 1990s. It was simpler to hide in the hectic and long hours restaurant industry. No one questioned it. He referred to it as barely surviving. He knew the cost, but he managed to do the task nonetheless. Almost all of the cooks he had collaborated with in his early career perished. They had vanished, burnout, wrecks, and overdoses. In the early 2000s, he was able to clean up, but the harm was everywhere. He began to sense something growing inside of him while he was employed at Les Halls. He wanted to be honest about life in restaurants. The real thing, not the attractive one. So, toxic pressure repurposed food and pharmaceuticals. He wrote stories in his notes about what actually happened in the kitchen. He then wrote and distributed Don't Eat Before Reading This in 1999. Most people turned it down. Then one night, when he was inebriated and frustrated, he sent it to the New Yorker. That one act altered everything, even if he didn't expect much would come of it. Gladys Bourdain, his mother, worked as an editor at the New York Times for a long time. She knew how to accomplish things and had faith in him. She handed the piece over to a Times reporter who was married to the New Yorker's new editor, David Remnick. It ended up on the right desk in this manner. It went right to someone who understood its power, avoiding the slush pile. The piece might never have been published if it weren't for his mother's small encouragement, but it did. And it was powerful. People were astonished when the item appeared in the New Yorker on April 19, 1999. It revealed the true functioning of kitchens. Bourdain discussed repurposed bread, aged fish, and the misfits searching for family in kitchens. He was unvarnished in his honesty. It wasn't your typical elegant food writing. It was dark, humorous, and gritty. Everyone recognized him overnight. It was discussed in kitchens, offices, and dining rooms. It made a difference because his voice was different. Kitchen Confidential was the result of that buzz. He developed the anecdotes from the essay into a comprehensive memoir. The book was wild when it was published in 2000. He wrote about everything from drugs to sex to accidents. He advised against ordering well-done steak or fish on Mondays. He described how he managed to finish dinner service despite cutting his thumb open throughout his shift. The book achieved success as a bestseller. Numerous languages have translated it. He was selected Food Writer of the Year by Bon Appetit. He was more than just a chef all of a sudden. He was the one revealing what everyone else was trying to conceal. The change happened quickly. In the weeks following the book's publication, Bourdain appeared on Letterman, Oprah, and every other talk show that would allow him. Publishers from all around the world converged. Everything in his life changed. He went from working double shifts at Les Halls to touring the world in a single year. In 2002, Anthony Bourdain launched his first television program. It was broadcast on the Food Network and was titled A Cook's Tour. He shot 35 episodes over 2 years. It wasn't simply his charisma that set this show apart. It was the way he immersed himself in odd and occasionally startling culinary adventures. One of his most well-known moments in Vietnam was when he swallowed a still-beating cobra heart. Many fans were taken aback by that moment, which went on to become one of the most talked-about parts of the show. He traveled to new locales with each episode. He dined with geishas in Japan, traveled to isolated villages in Cambodia, and visited Tokyo's fish markets. In Africa, he even consumed wild game. Small Sony DV cameras were used to shoot the show. This gave everything a gritty, authentic appearance that complemented Bourdain's speech. He had no desire to be flawless. He was attempting to be truthful. There was more to this show than just food. It discussed risk, culture, and people. What would become his hallmark style was just getting started. He started no reservations when he joined the Travel Channel in 2005. There were roughly 140 episodes in this series, which ran till 2012. He visited almost 80 countries, but it was much more than simply travel and food. It explored complex political and cultural problems through food. Bourdain visited Haiti following the 2010 earthquake in one episode. The strong camera work in that episode earned it an Emmy. He also traveled to nations like Iran, where it was uncommon for American crews to be permitted. He ate pieces of warthogs in Namibia. He drank snake blood in Vietnam. She drank snake. The program received multiple Emmy Awards and received numerous nominations. It demonstrated that if a culinary show was honest, it could gain significant respect. Bourdain faced a faster struggle in 2011. The Layover is the name of the show he created. He was only allowed to tour a city for 1 or 2 days per episode. He traveled to cities like Seattle and Singapore. Showing viewers what they could do during a real-world layover was the aim. The emphasis was on obscure local locations, and the tempo was quick. Sometimes he didn't even sleep as he bounced between posh pubs and tiny food carts. The program became another blockbuster and continued till 2013. It appealed to those with limited time who wished to travel. It demonstrated that even quick journeys might be brimming with discoveries. Bourdain evolved to become more than just a TV personality and chef. He turned into a cultural spokesperson. He used food as a means of understanding people while seated at restaurants all across the world. He related tales of history, poverty, and battle. He demonstrated the connection between food and dignity, memory, and survival. He used the simple act of sharing a meal to teach viewers about the globe in Zambia, Cambodia, and other locations. He frequently listened to home families and street cooks in addition to well-known chefs. For him, a meal was about more than just flavor. It was about bonding. A significant event occurred in his personal life in 2007. Octavia Boucher was married to Bourdain. Her fighting style was mixed martial arts. On April 9th of the same year, their daughter Ariane was born in New York. This changed everything, according to Bourdain. He claimed that he began making changes in his life as soon as he witnessed her birth. He made an effort to find time for his family despite his hectic schedule. He made Friday night special by cooking for Ariane when he got home. Fatherhood softened him. He frequently stated that he enjoyed being a father and didn't merely enjoy it. He claimed that spending time with Ariane offered him genuine joy even later in his career. He furthered his narrative in 2013 when he debuted a new CNN program. The title was Hearts Unknown. On April 14th, the first episode was shown and brought him to Myanmar. Although the majority of the media had long been excluded from that nation, Bourdain did more than just study cuisine. He investigated secret lives, politics, and challenges. Out of 31 nominations, the show took home 12 Emmys. It received a Peabody Award as well. He visited countries that weren't on most people's travel lists, such as the Congo and Libya. His homeland of New York served as the setting for the last episode. It was like going back to his origins. However, the CNN years demonstrated the true potential of food television. At the same time, Bourdain experimented from 2013 to 2015. He joined The Taste, a culinary competition, as a judge. ABC aired it. Judges tasted meals without knowing who prepared it, which was a twist. He collaborated with Nigella Lawson, Ludo Lefebvre, and Brian Malarkey to mentor professional and home cooks. Fans were shocked to learn how much he loved it. Even though it was different from his typical work, He claimed that he preferred making snap judgments over lengthy discussions. Like him, it was honest, genuine, and quick. He shot a parts unknown episode in Argentina in 2016. It turned into one of his career's most poignant moments. He attended therapy during the time. Almost no other city has as many therapists as Buenos Aires, and Bourdain spoke with one on video. He talked candidly about his melancholy, his battles with depression, and how trivial things could make him feel depressed. He discussed how difficult it was to be vulnerable with those he loved. This episode had a really intimate feel to it. It was all the more potent after his death 2 years later. It demonstrated a man with the courage to acknowledge his pain. In the background, the strain continued to mount. Almost 250 days a year were spent filming in Bourdain. He put his all into his work. However, he acknowledged in private that he frequently felt empty. The celebrity didn't appeal to him. The attention did not sit well with him. He occasionally admitted to intimate friends and family that he didn't even like his admirers. He was constantly exhausted. His text conversations revealed that he felt trapped in the career that brought him fame. Even when he wanted to rest, he was unable to stop. Bourdain and Octavia split up in 2016. They had a daughter together and had been together since 2007, but the lengthy work hours and frequent travel were too much for their relationship to handle. There was no major altercation or scandal. The life he led just caused them to drift apart. They remained close friends. Nevertheless, Octavia frequently publicly backed him and shared joyful family photos on social media. Ariane was still co-parented by them. Bourdain once made a joke about how he ended up with Jean-Claude Van Damme even though he believed he was marrying Sophia Loren. It was a humorous method to demonstrate the strength and bravery she had developed as a result of her MMA training. Anthony Bourdain was in Rome at the end of 2016 recording a parts unknown episode. It was there that he first encountered Asia Argento. In Italy, she was already a well-known director and actress. There had been an electric connection between them from the start. Their relationship progressed quickly. They became a couple in a matter of weeks. The media was soon unable to quit discussing them. Octavia Busia and Bourdain were still legally wed at the time. However, his private life was not the only thing altered by this new partnership. His public appearance changed as a result. Bourdain was one of the most outspoken defenders of Argento when she accused Harvey Weinstein of assault in October 2017. He stood by her side, conducted interviews, and posted a defense tweet. Their relationship, which began on camera, swiftly grew stronger and more difficult to manage. The speed at which things became serious astounded the friends. According to some, Bourdain developed an obsessional pattern. To spend a few days with her, he would travel across the world. He started to cut people out of his life, skipped work, and disregarded schedules. Charles Lee Rosen's biography claims that Argento wasn't always nice to him. She frequently made him feel inferior or disregarded him. However, rather than retreating, Bourdain leaned closer. He made sacrifices, wrote lengthy notes, and sent gifts. Those who knew him started calling him irresponsible. "You were careless with my emotions," he told her in one of his last texts. Everything was encapsulated in the single line. How profoundly everything had gone wrong, his suffering, his commitment. Then followed the scandal that nearly everyone was stunned by. The New York Times reported in August 2018 that actor Jimmy Bennett had received a payment of $380,000. In 2013, he claimed that Argento had sexually assaulted him in a hotel in California. At the time, she was 37 and he was 17. That is below the age of consent in California. When records revealed that Bourdain had assisted in setting up the payment, the genuine surprise was revealed. He wished to keep them both out of the spotlight and shield them from a media frenzy. In texts, Argento had acknowledged the incident. Taking control of the hush money was Bourdain, only a few weeks prior to his passing. The payment was made. It felt like betrayal to many members of the Me Too movement. One of their most powerful voices had been Argento's. Now, Bourdain had contributed to the silence around a case that put her at the center of major questions. Bourdain grew further estranged from the rest of his life as their bond grew. He ceased to see pals. He spent less time with Ariane, his daughter. When he passed away, she was just 11. According to many who knew him, he had begun to fade away. He had referred to becoming a father as the greatest thing that had ever happened to him for years. Even that, however, seemed to take a backseat in his last months. Later on, Otavia talked of the suffering Ariane endured following his passing. The young child who had formerly admired her father was now left in quiet bereavement and bewilderment. He never lost his affection for her, but it was overshadowed by everything else. He started to lose his mind. It was visible to those around him. Bourdain began using steroids. He drank until he lost consciousness. He visited prostitutes. In interviews, he acknowledged feeling isolated. He called his loneliness crushing in a 2016 therapy session. That was a long time before things were too much to handle. He was unable to escape the maelstrom that was produced by his destructive decisions and emotional suffering. Those who were aware of his prior battles with addiction were concerned. However, it was more than simply drugs this time. It was about unending emotional suffering. He went to Strasbourg, France to shoot a new Parts Unknown episode in the beginning of June 2018. One of his best pals, Eric Reipert, was with him. They had been acquainted for about 2 decades. In Kaisersberg, the two of them stayed at the peaceful Le Chambard Hotel. They shared old jokes, ate local cuisine, and rode bikes. Rippert frequently played the cool side to Bourdain's crazy side and had appeared on a number of his shows. Everything appeared normal from the outside. In addition to working, Bourdain was eating and laughing. But something had begun to shatter inside. New images started making the rounds in Italian media on June 3. They showed Argento at a Rome restaurant, holding hands and embracing French journalist Hugo Clement. It wasn't just any eatery. She and Bourdain have frequently stayed together at the same hotel. The location and time struck a deep chord. According to reports, Argento was incensed about the photographs. She even requested that one remove the pictures. However, the pictures survived. They spread quickly. International news organizations started soliciting feedback. For Bourdain, the betrayal went beyond simple adultery. It concerned the painful transformation of shared memories. The ensuing text messages were devastating. In a letter to Argento, Bourdain expressed his lack of jealousy. He pleaded for kindness but said he didn't want to dominate her. He reiterated, "You were careless with my life and my heart." She gave a chilly sentence in response. "This is too much for me to handle." Her last remarks were brutal as he pressed again. "Quit wasting my time. My time." The last words she spoke to him were those. His last texts were raw and frantic. They showed a man who was lonely and broken. He begged for consolation but got none. The evening of June 7th was when Rippert started to worry. There was no sign of Bourdain at dinner. He was not like that. Rippert even listened by pressing his ear to the wall. He was relieved to hear snoring at one point. He couldn't have known what was truly going on behind that door, but he assumed everything was fine. As usual, Bourdain had worked, eaten, and joked throughout the day, but he had already begun to distance himself. Even though there were many people around him, he felt very alone. Reipert knocked on Bourdain's door early the following morning, June 8. No response was found. He went inside around 9 or 10 in the morning and located his pal. Bourdain had left. His age was 61. No evidence of foul play was found by the police. His system contained traces of a prescribed drug, but no narcotics. The Globe was horrified by the news. The tributes came pouring in. Because of him, people shared their meals, quotes, and memories from every continent. His body was burned in France 5 days later. The United States received his ashes back. Later, Rippert claimed that the hurt from that day would never leave him. According to court documents, Bourdain left his daughter almost $1.02 million after his passing. The estate contained $250,000 in personal belongings, $425,000 in cash and savings, and an additional $500,000 in intellectual property and royalties. Otavia was tasked with overseeing it until she reached 18 when Ariane was still a child. And there was one last poignant detail. Ariane had also inherited Bourdain's frequent flyer miles. How she used them would be up to her. In the hopes that she would take a piece of that world with her, it was his way of sharing the experiences that molded his life. She was on his mind even as he made his final choices.